Here with my co-host Russ Hodges, here to talk all things TCU athletics today on the pod. Sorry we're getting a little late to it this week. We had some technical difficulties, but we're back in the saddle, ready to go again, giving you some fun discussion here on all things TCU. Coming off the big win against SMU, bringing the Iron Skillet back to Fort Worth, and ahead of the Big 12 opener hosting Oklahoma, 11 a.m. ABC, Amon G. Carter Stadium. Hope to see everybody out there this weekend. Before we get into all things football, just a few quick news hits. First thing, TCU Soccer back at it, got conference play started last week and got a draw with Texas at home. Very hard-fought game there. Really tough Texas team, and then picked up a win at Kansas. So Frogs have climbed up to number 9 nationally there, and will take on Kansas State Friday night. So looking forward to that as the soccer squad keeps their push towards a postseason and another Big 12 championship. Other basketball news, Russ, what do we got in basketball?
Yeah, we have some more preseason hype. I believe Andy Katz put out a thing recently that TCU could be top 10 in the preseason poll. And I know we talked a little bit on the pod last week about the hype surrounding TCU basketball, obviously with the uniform drop. But again, with all the guys that are coming back, Mike Miles, Eddie Lampkin, Damian Baugh, obviously we have we're still waiting to hear what's going on with that suspension. I still believe that it's not going to wind up being anything too crazy, but again, even with the guys like Emmanuel Miller and O'Bannon, you bring in Rondell Walker, the transfer from Oklahoma State, who you figure is going to get some time. PJ Haggerty coming in, just a lot of continuity with the program, so a lot of excitement there. And then just looking at the non-conference schedule, a couple of tough matchups in there, but not too much that I think should really trip up the Horned Frogs as they get into the Big 12 schedule. So it's going to be here before we know it. Obviously, NBA is starting to get back to practice, and preseason will be starting up there shortly. So this fall goes by fast, man. It's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we're already a quarter of the way through TCU's football season. We're already, just like a month away from basketball season's tipping off. So, and yeah, man, I'm so excited for this basketball season. It's the hype is out of control, but it's really exciting to see TCU basketball here on the national stage like this. And yeah, with the in the last week, the Big 12 released conference schedules, so we now have kind of the full picture of what TCU's schedule will look like. And the Big 12 is just such a gauntlet to go through, that double round robin where you play home and home against every other opponent, and everybody is a top team. Everybody's coming into the season with Sweet 16 or better dreams. And so yeah, there's no nights off in the Big 12 basketball, and get started right away with Texas Tech at home on New Year's Eve. There's no time announced yet, but I'm kind of hoping it's kind of in the evening. So we've got like a big exciting event to then go into your New Year's Eve events for the evening, and then right into away at Waco and at Baylor. So those are two, maybe Final Four level teams that you get right off the bat to start conference play. It's going to be a tough road, but excited to see what these folks can do with it.
Yeah, you get a basketball game on New Year's Eve, and then who knows, maybe you get a TCU football game that same day. If things go well this season, you never know.
I like it. I like the optimism. We'll see how things go this weekend on how successful this TCU football season will be. Before we get to that, let's take a quick look back at the big win in Dallas over SMU. Finally, end the losing streak to the Ponies. Sonny Dykes gets to go back into his old home and take the trophy back from the Mustangs. And is an exciting game. TCU wins 42-34, and that score both feels closer than it should have been watching the game, but then also SMU had a chance late where it could have gotten dicey there. So I think it's a fair score. Happy to just get out of there with the win, leave non-conference undefeated. But I guess just from watching the game, Russ, what were your thoughts on some highlight players or plays that really kind of point to TCU football's success in this one?
Yeah, I think last week we talked about one of the keys to the game being the turnover battle. Whichever team forced more turnovers, I felt was going to be the winner. And obviously a couple interceptions. Josh Newton gets a huge one late to help sort of seal that win. Kenry Miller came out right away, ran the ball super well. I think he had 84 yards rushing on his first 3 carries or something like that. And TCU just came out and started the game exactly how I hoped they would. Very aggressive, very explosive early on, getting a 28-7 lead. Of course, Darius Davis was phenomenal throughout the game, again, continuing a really good start to the season. A few penalties hurt TCU in the first half, most of them coming from Trey Tomlinson, who struggled a little with that matchup against Rashee Rice, but
trying to stop Rashee Rice is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Second half came around. I thought TCU got a little too passive on the offensive end. You had some obvious run calls, some screen passes that never really developed, and they sort of allowed SMU to come back into the game slowly, but I think the Mustangs also deserve a little bit of credit there. They came out and I think made a much more concerted effort to try and stop the run and set TCU up in some obvious, second and long, third and long passing situations. And TCU gave up some sacks as well. I think it wound up being 5 or 6 sacks in the game. I think most of them were, what you'd call a coverage sack when there's just no one open down the field and
holding on to the ball too long, and yeah, on that one, I guess I wonder if there was a clear directive or game plan to limit Duggan's kind of scrambling, kind of maybe suggest, hey, just hang on in there, and if the throw isn't there, just take the lost yardage on the sack. We didn't really see Duggan let loose like he tends to do, where he just kind of escapes out of there and takes off running. So it kind of felt like maybe that was a goal of the game that they had given to him of, hey, take your passes down the field, and if it's not there, you don't need to go running around and try to make it happen through the air. So the sacks, I wish, I think also Alana Lee went down in the second half and had to leave the field for a little bit, the center for TCU, the SMU transfer, and almost immediately the offensive line took a step back, and it felt like right there that was we were hanging in the balance a little bit because the offense started to stall. But yeah, definitely agree with you there. Some of the highlights for me, I think just that touchdown to Sevion Williams. It's great to see him get involved. It was an excellent play from Duggan, kind of rolling out, finding him in the end zone. He makes the grab. Get the game started with a highlight like that. Probably play of the game is the Josh Newton interception and return down, like a 30-yard return. That was SMU was driving down one score, chance to go tie the game, and TCU hadn't really looked all that great all second half, and he sets the Frogs up right there in scoring position that I think that was one that DeMarcado ended up taking in, but it's hard to remember which ones were DeMarcado and which ones were Miller. They both had huge games and both excelled, while taking all of the rushing carries. No rushes to any other players, which was a bit surprising, but the two of them were more than capable handling the load.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Max Duggan you looked at the stats. I think he wound up with minus 11 rushing, which is very again uncharacteristic. But Amari DiMercato came through late. Admittedly, I haven't been the biggest Amari DiMercato champion, but he's a sixth-year player. He has a lot of experience. He's a good, tough runner. And the offensive line deserves some credit as well, just for being able to dig deep and, like you said, making some adjustments. I believe Steve Avila moved back to center after Ali went out, and they had a couple other guys that were rotated around, and they were able to buckle down in the run game and get back to what they did well at the start of the game, which was making some big holes. And as soon as DiMercato broke through for that long touchdown at the end, you started to see the fans slowly but surely begin to file out of Gerald J. Ford Stadium, which can we hit on that real quick? Because I know before the game,
for sure,
SMU fans were talking about how it was going to be a sold-out stadium, and
it's a sellout.
There were a lot of videos and photos that I had seen online from people who were at the game, folks in the media who were covering the game, and I don't know, man, a lot of seats were empty. I don't know if people just bought tickets and didn't show up, or if maybe some of them were season ticket holders, but they look pretty empty, man. I mean, what did you hear about the environment in the stadium that day?
Yeah, and shout out to Matthew from our team at Frogs of War. He was there on site and was giving you guys all the live tweets from in the stadium. Thanks to him, he was sending some fun photos out of like, oh yeah, this section is pretty much all purple. And even right before kickoff, like, oh, the most of the people actually in the stadium, it's pretty purple. So yeah, I think TCU fans definitely showed up. SMU fans, whatever, however many there are, some were there, and the ones that were there, it seemed like there was a lot of animosity. There was a lot of, the players talked about hearing it from the sidelines, and that, they were really impressed with Coach Dykes he never turned around. He never got phased. He never kind of let any of that noise get to him, which was good. And the team didn't either. I think some of the clips from after the game walking out of the stadium were unfortunate, that folks were kind of left their trash everywhere, were throwing, empty water bottles at the field. It's a football game, guys. And Coach Dykes, there's the video of him kind of waving off as he's walking off, like, see you guys, thanks, see you later. I don't know if he's waving at TCU fans or SMU hecklers or what that was, but that was, I don't know that sellout, quote unquote sellout from SMU was all that much to write home about. I think it was much more, TCU brought a healthy amount of folks there, and whatever fans were there were quickly quieted as the first half just TCU kind of took over. Trying to think if there's, we noted the penalties. That was something that was concerning, but is it a couple of things? Is it this officiating crew was poor? I think it's easy to wear your purple glasses and kind of see things through your fan eyes of, okay, well, that shouldn't have been a penalty, or call it both ways. There were a couple of Quentin Johnston, contested plays that they didn't call pass interference where they did for Rice. He was getting kind of the Michael Jordan treatment out there. And, I'm not too worried about it. I think there are a lot of people getting on Tomlinson I saw that a lot on social media of, hey, Trey Tomlinson is supposed to be this all-American level, all Big 12 level guy, and he's giving up these penalties to this American team. What's going on here? But I think Rashee Rice is a high-level player. He's been torching all opponents all season. He was held like 90 yards below his season average against the Frogs. So he was pretty well contained. He did get that touchdown right to near the end of the half that, may or may not have been a push-off. We'll never know. If you were watching on TV, the camera crew at SMU was pretty atrocious as well. We were never really following the ball. It was rough. But I think that could have been a push-off either way. He gets that touchdown. He gets to celebrate. Good for him. But I thought Hodges Tomlinson did fine there, and we shouldn't really take too much from that. He wasn't really torched. Rice got his catches, but a lot of them were contested or potential push-offs, or I don't know. I think we're okay in the secondary going forward. Looking forward to another top-level receiver in Marvin Mims in the Oklahoma offense.
Yeah, and I think when you look back at that SMU game, they're going to go back and watch the film. And I think when you're a smaller DB going up against a bigger receiver, body positioning is so key. A lot of those penalties that were drawn were just from being too handsy, grabbing a little too much. And of course, a lot of those calls are subjective too with the officiating. But it just comes down to body positioning, anticipation, not being caught behind, being able to make a play on the ball and not making a play on the body of the receiver before the ball gets there, because then flags can come out. So those are adjustments I think they'll make. Again, like you said, as we go into Oklahoma, which is going to have a much more explosive receiving core and a quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, who's off to a very good start. 11 touchdown passes without an interception. So they've been very efficient through the air. Collectively, I think the secondary held up pretty well against SMU, especially considering the front six guys didn't get home too much. That's one thing that I was watching the game with my dad, and one thing that he kept saying is, they got to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. And, in a 3-3-5, like we had talked about on the pod last week, you're relying a little more on your linebackers and even your DBs to provide some blitz pressure. And it felt like a lot of these plays, these blitz plays were sort of slow developing. You need the secondary to hold up for anywhere from 3 to 4 seconds before the guys get home. And it felt like it wasn't happening enough in that game where, Mordecai did take some hits, but it was like they were a step late. You know what I mean? So I think in the Oklahoma game, TCU's got to find some ways to get creative in pressuring Dylan Gabriel, who's also a playmaker with his legs, too. We can't forget that. He's done that at Central Florida, and, again, he's playing very efficient football to start the season.
Yeah, I think that would be the concern there is, Mordecai is a good athlete, but Dylan Gabriel, I think, is a next level up where you throw too much pressure at him and you kind of run past him and he can escape out and turn on the jets to get some first downs. So, you don't want to see them rush with abandon recklessly, but yeah, definitely something to watch moving forward is how this new defense gets pressure on the quarterback. I guess before we move off the game, I have to just give another shout out to Kendre Miller. I mean, a dominant performance from him. We've been kind of looking for his breakout, a little bit of a slow start to the season, and he definitely took care of business, ran with power, with speed, and put moves on guys. It just seems like a nightmare to tackle in the open field. And, really excited to see him continue to improve and take over this lead role. That, losing Zach Evans, a player of that caliber, it hurts. But when you have someone as high level as Kendre Miller, TCU's been able to pick right up in his
Yeah,
absence.
a player that last couple of years has always been extremely productive when he's had the opportunities, just never really had the opportunities because of Zach Evans or whoever else. And I don't know if you saw the graphic that was shown early in the game with Kenry Miller at 7.08 yards per carry, leading Power 5 schools, and who was number 2 on the list at 7.07?
Mm-hmm.
Zach Evans from Ole Miss.
Yep.
So, that comparison is going to stay there, I think, as the season goes on. And Zach's obviously off to a very good start with Ole Miss, but very confident in Kenry Miller. I think fans are confident in him. Coaches are confident in him. And, Oklahoma is a team that historically I think TCU has been able to put up some points against. And if I remember correctly, last year, Kenry Miller had a pretty solid performance. Might have gotten banged up in that game, but a player who I think can definitely go off when you consider how well Kansas State ran the ball against the Sooners last week. Deuce Vaughn had over 100 yards, which that's just Deuce Vaughn doing Deuce Vaughn things. But Adrian Martinez as well got into open space multiple times and was able to just run right down the field for a score. So excited to see how Kenry Miller moves forward and the rest of these running backs as well.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's wrap up last week with quick recap on Big 12 and the big national games. So in the Big 12, Thursday night, West Virginia took home it's some trophy. Black Diamond?
Yeah.
Black Diamond trophy over Virginia Tech. Poor Virginia Tech. They're really struggling. So that's a big win for West Virginia to get that they'd been struggling. So good for them. Kansas took down Duke, so Kansas just keeps it rolling. It's a football school now. That's
so sold out crowd. I think they may have had an actual sold out crowd.
That was a real sellout.
Yeah, that was a real.
That was an actual sellout, and they're sitting one spot out of the top 25 in the AP poll, and it's exciting times for Kansas football. I think it's approaching time to stop thinking of that as like fun and interesting and like kind of scary that they might be good this season. And TCU's trip up there to Lawrence later this year is going to be a very interesting. Actually, is that next week? I think I don't have the calendar in front of me, but
yeah. For whatever reason, we talked. Yesterday we were just shooting the breeze a little bit. We talked about how Kansas State seems to just have Oklahoma's matchup. TCU and Kansas always seem to play a close match. It never really seems to matter who's really good or who's really bad. It seems like that one is always close. I believe it was 2015 when TCU went up to Lawrence and almost lost.
It was either 14 or 15. That game was up there in Lawrence. That was way scarier than it needed to be.
So, and I mean, even last year, again, both teams last year were kind of down bad, but a really close game. And no, Kansas, it's really, we talked about it last week. It's really encouraging to see. And Jalen Daniels has played exceptionally well at the quarterback position. I remember watching him a few years ago when TCU went to Lawrence and got a huge win, and he was I think he was starting as a true freshman. This was when Les Miles, I believe, was still coaching there, and they really struggled. I mean, they were struggling to even get the ball snapped, and it was just, you knew there was a lot of work to be had for whichever coaching staff was going to come in, but Jalen Daniels has really developed as a passer, and they run the ball extremely well. They have multiple players, including Jalen Daniels, who can run the ball. So not a pushover by any stretch. And I think Kansas has an opportunity again now to go to 5-0. So we'll see what happens. That might be there for TCU next week. Who knows?
That could be a big top 25 matchup. So not to tangent too much on this, but looking at a stat of top quarterback rating thus far this season in the Power Five. Number 1 is Max Duggan. And number 6 is Daniels from Kansas. And then number 10 is Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma. And actually 9 is Spencer Sanders at Oklahoma State. So a lot of the top QBs in the country right now, performance-wise, playing in the Big 12. So we'll see how that stands up through the rest of the season. But pretty wild that Max Duggan is sitting atop that list, and then the Kansas quarterback is also on that list. Okay, sorry. Moving on to the horns down. This one, pretty crazy game. Texas Tech defeats Texas in overtime, 37-34. Bijan Robinson, best running back in football, all of that stuff, fumbles in overtime, and Texas Tech hits that field goal to win the game and storm the field in, Texas Tech fashion that ended up getting them fined and, might ruin it for everybody that you can't storm fields. But did you get a chance to watch any of this one? That was pretty wild.
I did,
game.
yeah. It's very, the last player you expect to fumble is Bijan Robinson, especially on the first, I believe it was the first play from scrimmage in overtime that Texas had. Pretty wild how that happened, and then Texas almost scores a touchdown. They get it down to, I think, the 1 or 2 yard line, and then it cost them $50K after the game, obviously, but that fine, I believe, has already been covered by, what was it, was it their NIL fund or one of the local banks that covered the fine? So that's chump change for those guys. I don't know how I feel about a team rushing the field against the number 22 in the country, but it is Texas Tech. So
yeah, it's fun. Rush the field. It's a fun time. Just
they need
and it's fun to beat Texas. I mean, anybody
they need something to do over there in Lubbock. So.
Oh yeah. So, all right. Next was the Kansas State beat Oklahoma. We talked about that a little bit, and we'll talk about Oklahoma more coming up. But yeah, the Sooners just couldn't stop Deuce Vaughn again. Couldn't stop Adrian Martinez, who very clearly is happy to be away from Nebraska. We can move on from that. We've hit that one. Baylor took down Iowa State in Ames, 31-24. I was pretty surprised to see that Iowa State was favored in this game. Baylor, I think, is very clearly a better team than Iowa State. I guess there was a lot of value put into the game being played in Ames, but and Baylor hasn't looked super sharp so far this year. Blake Shapen hasn't been maybe as good as advertised, but he's rounding into form, and that's just a better team than Iowa State at this point. I mean, all those Cyclone stars are gone or in the NFL, and it's kind of just left. It's Xavier Hutchinson and a lot of other guys. Some funny plays in this game, like there was Jarrell Brock had a fumble into the end zone as he was going into the end zone, somehow recovered it before it landed out of bounds for a touchback. Still, Iowa State loses the game. Any other thoughts on Big 12?
Baylor, Iowa State, I think last week we talked about the potential for that to be a close game just because Ames sometimes can be a very tough place to play. Iowa State, I think, has defended well to start the season. They turned the ball over a few too many times. Hunter Deckers had 2 interceptions in that game that really hurt him. And Kansas State, Oklahoma, Adrian Martinez had really struggled to throw the ball over the first few games. Has been a playmaker on the ground. That's nothing new, and he showed that in that game. But he did enough through the air. Was very efficient through the air, and it wound up being a career best performance for him. So really encouraging sign for the Wildcats if you're a Kansas State fan that he was able to put together a collective performance not only on the ground but through the air. And if that's something that can be replicated moving forward, not saying he's going to go off for that many yards and that many touchdowns every week, but if you can make enough happen through the air, that's going to be huge, not only for him running the ball, but also for Deuce Vaughn, because I think a lot of teams are looking at Kansas State saying, Deuce Vaughn is priority one. We got to stop him. He's a proven big-time offensive threat, but if they can move the ball through the air consistently as well, that adds a whole new dynamic to that offense. So,
all right, some quickly on some national games. In double overtime, Clemson took down Wake Forest. Really exciting game. A lot of Aaron Judge cut-ins during this game that to interrupt whatever excitement was happening there. But exciting game, and I think the demise of DJ Uyunglele is maybe exaggerated. He was really good in this game. Sam Hartman on Wake Forest side, really good in this game. An exciting back and forth that Clemson comes away with. And, I don't know that they're getting enough credit, Clemson, as this being a big-time win and them as a real playoff contender. I think a lot of people are still really down on them, and maybe they're kind of can sleep their way into the playoff later on. But right now, I think they're still sitting in like 6th or 7th on the AP poll. And so there's definitely, we're going to hear more from Clemson, and they've got a big game this week with NC State coming to town. If that game gets played with the Hurricane, so we'll see what happens there. But exciting one there. What was Russ? You have one specific to talk to on the national games?
I'll just hit on Clemson Wake Forest real quick. Another game that I felt last week could be a close one just because Wake Forest was going to have Sam Hartman back. It's really encouraging to see him play well. Obviously, the story was the heart condition and whether or not he'd even be able to play again. But they get him back, and DJ Uyunglele really has been struggling with his consistency over the last year or so, but had a huge performance there, and that could be something that springboards a player like him for more success in the future, because he's always been extremely talented. I mean, the heir apparent to Trevor Lawrence, and just hasn't.
Yeah, that's a heavy burden. That's a heavy crown to wear to try to come in and fill in after Trevor Lawrence, after Deshaun Watson. Yeah, I mean it's a big spot, and it looks like for now he's going to hold off Cade Klubnik from taking his job. So good for him there. I guess just to hit on a couple of the big upsets that were surprising. I put on here the Boise State losing to UTEP. Poor Boise. I mean, it feels like they've completely fallen off this is the team that should be one of the top 2 or 3 G5s pushing for that New Year's Six bid. I don't know that Auburn fans are super happy to have Brian Harsin from Boise, but I think Boise hasn't done great without him either. Just interesting there. And there was a time when Boise was one of TCU's primary rivals. And,
oh, yeah.
There was
BCS Bowl
that
rival.
2011, and that 2011 game in Boise was one of the most exciting games of all time for the Frogs, and they've kind of really disappeared here. Which they could still come back and end up winning the Mountain West, but they already have 2 losses, and a loss to UTEP is a tough one. And then the Miami Hurricanes losing to Middle Tennessee at home. And not just losing, just getting absolutely boat raced, just destroyed by an MTSU team that I think people had kind of determined was terrible because they lost to James Madison, and James Madison just made the move to FCS, from FCS. Turns out James Madison is really good, and actually MTSU is much better than Miami. And it's the kind of thing of like, okay, you brought in, you spent all this money to go fire your coach, get your new coach, and you've got this hotshot quarterback that everybody's talking about for a first round. And just like that coach did with Justin Herbert in Oregon, Tyler Van Dyke seems to be like he's completely lost all of his mojo for the Hurricanes. So I don't know if that's a crystal ball thing or if that's just I don't know. But they've also totally fallen off the cliff here.
Yeah, that was a very discouraging performance to see if you're a Hurricane fan. And we briefly talked last week about some jobs around college football where certain coaches maybe could be on the hot seat. Virginia Tech, I think, is one. We talked about West Virginia going in and taking that Black Diamond Trophy game 33-10. I think Virginia Tech fans on Twitter are very discouraged with where that program sits right now, because we know Virginia Tech has had a lot of success in the past. And, Miami, there's, of course, such a prestige and a level of swagger that program should have. And losing to Middle Tennessee State ain't going to do much for that. So couple seats that could be getting a little the burners are being lit under those seats.
Yeah, two ACC teams in the first few weeks of tenures of new coaches, and already they're kind of ready to jump ship off of their new coaches. So yeah, people get upset fast, can turn on the new coach fast, and luckily we haven't had to do that with Dykes here at TCU. That picking up 3 wins and feeling pretty good about ourselves going forward.
Yep. Only team in Texas that's unbeaten right now, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's right. The only undefeated Texas team in the state of Texas in the FBS. TCU, part of that is we've only played 3 games and it's been 4 weeks. We've already given up our bye week for the Frogs, but looking ahead to what's next for TCU. Big 12 opener, Oklahoma. It's the big ABC game on 11 a.m. Saturday morning, Amon G. Carter Stadium. Yeah, a lot of excitement here, a lot of opportunity for TCU to really go show that this team is one of the best in the conference, in the country, on the national stage. Just to hit some things that our Ask the Fans this week. Maybe these questions were a little too easy. I think we got runaway victories in some of these. So, first question was about our favorite TCU Oklahoma moment. Had the one from the 2005 win, the Paul Dawson pick 6 in the 14 win, and then the exciting pretty cool turnover plays against Jalen Hurts in 19, and then Quentin Johnston going full Randy Moss mode in 21. Yeah, I guess it should have been pretty obvious because it's one of the biggest moments in TCU history, but that Paul Dawson interception ran away with it there. I will just say I was a little surprised that there wasn't more love for the 2005 game, maybe just as we get more distance from that one. That game has a little bit of a special place in my heart, in that I was a senior in high school when that game happened, and I don't know that I end up at TCU if TCU doesn't win that game. I had filled out the stuff for TCU. I'm from Tennessee. I didn't really know much of TCU. I didn't know anything of it. TCU wins that game over Adrian Peterson, and it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Let me take another extra look at TCU, and the rest, I guess, is history. I apply, get in, and go, and here I am. But I guess did you have a favorite? I think it's pretty clearly and obviously the correct answer is the Dawson interception.
Yeah, so just a little background on me. I went to TCU, started in 2012. So right as TCU was getting into the Big 12, graduated in 2016. So enjoyed some very, very successful football seasons, and I was in the stands, obviously in the student section, for that 2014 game when TCU got the huge upset. I was among the thousands who rushed the field, dang near broke my ankle in my cowboy boots jumping down onto the field afterward. But that game is, I think about 3 or 4 moments in athletics throughout my time in college that I'll always remember. The first one was my freshman year when TCU basketball beat Kansas, and that was essentially like the 16 seed beating the 1 seed. Another probably the only time in my life I'll ever rush a basketball court. That's one I'll always remember. Number two is the upset win over Oklahoma. And then number three is the Alamo Bowl comeback against Oregon, because that was my senior year. I remember being so discouraged about Trevon Boykin getting arrested for getting in the
Yeah.
altercation with that bike cop. And my family and I, we have friends over. It's over the winter holiday, and down 31-0 at halftime. I'm despondent. I'm like dang near fully checked out, and then we get a field goal, and then some good fortune breaks our way with Vernon Adams, was that his name? Vernon Adams, the quarterback.
Yeah, the quarterback for
Yeah,
Oregon.
he
Yes.
goes
Yeah.
down. They lose their starting center, and then it just turns into a complete cluster for the Ducks, and we come back and win that game. Those are the three things I'll always remember. But getting back on Oklahoma, yeah, the Paul Dawson intercept, seeing it live, and being able to reflect on all of that was amazing. I remember that final throw of the game where Trevor Knight is just launching that Hail Mary into the corner of the end zone, and you have hundreds of students on the rail getting ready to jump over, and you're just looking at the football, and you're just like,
Please, please, please.
and that's and you know what? TCU Oklahoma is another one that it's always seemed to be competitive. Some very close games in the Big 12, and I don't expect this one to be any different. I think both teams have the ability to score a lot of points. So I'm really excited for it. Like you said, it's an opportunity for TCU fans to show up and show up big, and uh, I think the fans, the home fans, are gonna show up, and it's gonna be a raucous environment. Oklahoma travels well, so.
Yeah, for sure. And our next question was about, Oklahoma always has superstar athletes and had like three straight Heisman candidates and all of that. And there was one that stood out the most as absolutely torching and torturing TCU and TCU fans in Baker Mayfield. And I put the question to the fans of, is Baker Mayfield the number one player? Definitely not person. There's a former coach from Waco that's definitely the most hated person, but the player that kind of TCU fans disliked the most. And again, I was surprised, but Baker Mayfield just ran away with this one as the most disliked player. I thought maybe RG3 from Baylor, but no, it was all Baker, and people still remember how the way he threw a football and like in the warm-ups and knocked Nico Small like in his head as he's like recovering from a concussion, like whether or not that was intentional or it doesn't matter. He's just that kind of guy. So I don't know, that I was interested to see that Frog fans do still hold that kind of animosity towards him even these years later.
Yeah, and I think just because he had
yeah.
they had TCU's number on top of that, and in addition to the Nico Small incident, I think it was 2000 and what was it 2015 where Gary and Boykin thought that Baker was stealing signs because this is when he transferred from. Because
Right.
remember, Baker Mayfield started at Texas Tech and then transferred to
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, and supposedly he was on the sidelines. Obviously, he wasn't playing because he was not eligible, but was relaying signs that he had known, and there was all that drama, which that is what it is. But Baker was, listen, he was a really, really good college quarterback, and a guy who obviously played with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, regardless of how he manufactured that chip. He looked for a way to motivate himself and motivate his teammates, even if it was through stuff like that. So I wasn't too surprised with that just because he was so successful against TCU, and I think when you combine those two factors. It's not just the fact that he played with a bit of cockiness to his game, but he was also very good, had a lot of weapons,
Yeah.
and was very successful against the Frogs. So when you're losing over and over again to someone like that, it can stir the loins up a little bit. That's for sure.
Yeah, he talked all that trash, but he definitely backed it up against TCU and pretty much everybody else that they played. All right, the last question I had for the fans was, with Oklahoma leaving for the SEC at an undetermined time, could be next year, could be 2 years from now, we don't know yet. But obviously, leaving the conference, will this be Oklahoma's last trip to Amon G. Carter Stadium to take on the Horned Frogs? The consensus from the public was, yes, this is it. This is the last time we'll see Oklahoma in Fort Worth in the stadium. It's possible Oklahoma's still in the conference 2 years from now. Maybe next year it's a game in Norman, and really who knows how the schedule is going to look once we have the other 4 teams into the conference. But it's possible they come back then. It's possible TCU hosts a playoff game that Oklahoma, in this future playoff world that will eventually come down, that Oklahoma would have to come to Fort Worth. And then I kind of tongue-in-cheek said it's possible they come visit Amon G. Carter for an Armed Forces Bowl. Maybe that's a bowl game they have to come and play in sometime. But, I think we have been very focused on this season and the excitement for the Frogs this season, but it's kind of crazy that we're getting to this point where we may never see the Sooners play a game in Fort Worth again.
Yeah, you hope it's not. I personally hope it's not the last time we see Oklahoma, just because like I said, I feel like it's always a very good game. It's never overly one-sided, and Oklahoma's going to bring in a quality team every year, so it's always an opportunity to show how good of a team TCU has, and whether or not Texas and Oklahoma are going to take the buyout, I feel like they would, just because it's going to be a short-term loss, but you're going to make that money back real quick going to the SEC. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's the last time. Putting my Frog hat on, I hope it's not, but if it is, hopefully the fans show up and cheer for the Frogs with that mindset that this could be the last time and make it a memorable experience.
Send them out with a loss. Yeah. All right, let's get into this game matchup here. What is it that you see from TCU that they'll look to take advantage of to take a win from Oklahoma here?
I think they have to look at what Kansas State was able to do last week, and they exploited them in the run game. And I think when you look at TCU's offense now, you have so many different options with the way Darius Davis is playing, with the way Kenray Miller has run the ball. Max Duggan is capable of making plays with his legs, even though he didn't do it last week. You have a variety of ways with which you can run the football. You can run quarterback power, you can run a read option, you can run jet sweeps. You can get very creative with how you run the ball. Hopefully the offensive line is healthy and you can get back to your normal rotation for the Oklahoma game. But I think that's something I'll look for TCU to do from the start, and that's establish the run through a variety of ways. And they're going to challenge Oklahoma's defensive front just based off of what I saw last week. A defense that struggled to make plays in space. Once Adrian Martinez or Deuce Vaughn had a full head of steam, they weren't catching either of those two guys, and I think that's going to be the same case for these TCU skill players. So I think you're going to see TCU try to run the ball early. Again, it's kind of a cliche, but you bring up the turnover margin. These are two quarterbacks in Max Duggan and Dylan Gabriel who have not turned the ball over, this season. So the defense, the secondary, we know is going to be tested. Some better skill talent. Marvin Mims is going to be a tough player to slow down. Oklahoma's run the ball pretty well, so um, they're going to have to find a way to steal a possession or two to win this game. So those are some things I'm going to be looking out for.
Yeah, definitely. And you hit on the running game, but I think also uh, you said that getting players into space and forcing this Oklahoma defense to make tackles, to make stops. And I think that's, TCU has Darius Davis and all these skill players where with the ball in their hands, they can make magic happen. And if Duggan is able to get some of those little quick hitters to Barber or Davis or anyone else that give them a little bit of field and force the Oklahoma defense to make tackles and not give up yards after catch, yards after contact. That's a way to exploit that. And I'm really hoping also to see Quentin Johnston really let loose. We haven't seen much from him thus far this season. He's been held down pretty well by opposing defenses. Some of that may be game plan, game flow. Against Tarleton State, he may have played one series and, the game's already over. He doesn't need to go put his body on the line and his season on the line against Tarleton State. But I think here against Oklahoma on the national stage, we saw it last season. He put on a show and absolutely ate against that defensive backfield. So I think we might see some of that as well. I certainly hope he has another kind of his breakout game of this season, because we haven't gotten that one yet. And yeah, we've touched on it on the defensive side. I think, goodness, they got to get pressure and contain Gabriel. I'm pretty worried about his wheels. I feel like every chance that I can envision a world where TCU gets a couple of early, gives up a couple yards on first down, gets an incomplete pass second down, and then Gabriel just scrambles for a first down on third. I could see a lot of drives being extended that way, and that's the kind of thing that when you can't get this offense off the field, they are going to put up points. So containing him and minimizing those drives, get those drives over quickly, get TCU's offense back on the field and start pounding on that defense and just wear them out. That's what I hope to see. And yeah, I mean, Oklahoma, we know they have all the talent in the world. I do think Brent Venables and his coaching staff is strong and is on the right track. So, I don't know that there will be a lot of things to really exploit here. There's not a lot of weaknesses for this squad. So yeah, it's going to be make sure those red zone trips for the TCU offense turn into touchdowns, and that the red zone trips for Oklahoma turn into field goals or turnovers. Maybe there'll be some magic from Darius Davis in the special teams game. But like always, yeah, getting them off the field, whether it's turnovers or even surrendering field goals to this Oklahoma team is going to feel like a win a lot of times.
Yeah, and you bring up Quentin Johnston. I think a lot of that, he hasn't really gone off, but that's also because TCU's gotten a lot of different guys involved. And I believe against SMU, TCU, I want to say had 10 or 11 guys catch at least one pass or get at least one target. So that's been really the theme over these first three games is I think over each of the first three games, TCU has had 10 or more guys catch at least one ball. So they've been able to spread the field around and spread the ball around a little bit. But this is a game against a ranked opponent in conference play where you do need your stars to show up. So I do expect Quentin Johnston to get a greater share of the targets. I think Savion Williams and Darius Davis have obviously earned their share as well, just based off of how they've played so far. And then one thing we haven't talked about is just time of possession. Sometimes keeping a really potent offense off the field is just by being able to maintain and extend long drives. I was watching the Cardinals Rams game over the weekend, not to go off on a quick tangent here, but the Rams have one of the better offenses in the league, and even though Arizona lost the game, they had the ball for, I want to say, over 30 minutes in the game. And in the second quarter, for example, they had a drive that went 10 minutes. And even though they settled for three, you're keeping an offense off the field for a long time, which could make it difficult to get into a rhythm when you're just not out there. So that's another thing that could be accomplished by running the football for TCU. If they're able to run the football really well, you're taking time off the clock. You're keeping those talented playmakers off the field. And just one last little note, you talked about Dylan Gabriel potentially being a threat in the run game. I'll be curious to see if TCU keeps a spy on him for most of the game, whether it's D. Winters or Jamoy Hodge or Johnny Hodge is one of those linebackers. I feel like they're gonna have a spy on him for most of the game, just because if they do send multiple linebackers in blitz, you have to hope that your DBs are obviously winning some of those one-on-one matchups. But if he does escape the pocket,
a lot of field,
to work
a lot of field
with.
to go run
Yeah,
into.
so
Yep.
I'm interested to see how that shakes out. Maybe TCU doesn't blitz as much. Maybe they are happy with just sending three and playing a zone or a combination of zone and man, and it'll be exciting for sure. Beginning our slate of back-to-back 11 a.m. kickoffs. They announced Kansas is going to be 11 a.m. Hopefully we don't get too many of these moving
Oh,
forward.
did they? I missed that. Oh man,
Yeah,
already?
they announced that
Come
already,
on.
11 a.m.
Okay, well, all right. Let's close our preview here with the prediction. What's your final score? What do we see?
Yeah, so I'm gonna toot my own horn a little bit here, because last week I said 41-34.
Toot away, absolutely.
41-34 Frogs over SMU was my prediction last week, which the game sort of played out exactly how I thought it would. But what's the spread here? It's TCU 6.5-point dogs. What's the total points?
68.5 was what I saw last night.
68.5. Okay. I'm going to take the under there, just because I think there are going to be enough stops on the defensive end. But I'm going to go with TCU. I'm going to go with TCU every week. I'm just putting it out there now. I don't care if they lose. I'm going to go with the Frogs every week.
This is the Frogs of War podcast, okay? This is not the smart gambling podcast or the make the right pick necessarily podcast. This is this is the Frog fans
exactly.
here.
So I'm going to go TCU 34, Oklahoma 31. I think TCU covers the spread, but we're not going to get over 70 points. That's my prediction. Very conservative, like last week, but that's how I'm gonna roll with this.
I like it. I think this is one of those. I don't think TCU wins a blowout. I don't think Oklahoma wins a tight game. So I think it's either Oklahoma wins big, 2 scores at least, or TCU gets a close win. So I'm going to go with TCU gets a close win, and let's see. Give me 31-28. It's a slower defensive battle. I definitely am with you on the under. The marketplace is not. This number's been going up, and it may have already crossed over 69 or 69.5 at this point. But I'm just going to pull it real quick. Yeah, we're up to 69 on the total. So nice total there,
nice.
And
yeah.
I still think that's where the money's going. People are seeing a lot of points here, but I think these defenses are pretty strong, no matter how good the offenses are here. I think TCU can hold some and Oklahoma can too. So give me a lower scoring game, 31-28. Frogs come away with the win.
I like it. We're both thinking very similar predictions. Hopefully, we see a reflection in that result this weekend.
All right, just to wrap things up here before we let everyone go, we've got some big games in the Big 12 this week, starting with Texas Tech at Kansas State. Two teams that with big surprise wins last week. So this ends up being a pretty significant game in the Big 12 race towards getting to the conference championship. The winner here, goes to 2-0 in the conference. Kansas State's a big home favorite, 8 points. What do you think? Do you think the Raiders can take down Kansas State in Manhattan?
Absolutely. I think the Big 12 has so much parity right now that a lot of times I don't even really consider what happened the week before because every team is so evenly matched. I think Texas Tech has shown, beating Houston in a close game and obviously beating Texas, that they can compete against anybody. Donovan Smith has been a very explosive playmaker for that offense, but you have a Kansas State team that goes from losing against Tulane to going on the road and beating a top 10 team in the country. So that's just, I guess, the nature of college football sometimes, but I definitely think Texas Tech can win that game. If Donovan Smith can avoid turning the ball over, I think they'll have a great chance. So I can see that game. I can see so many of these games just coming down to the wire.
Every game could go either way.
I hate to just be like, oh, he's just playing it conservative. But I legitimately believe that a lot of these teams in the Big 12 are, and especially now with Kansas being 4-0, and Iowa State plays Baylor tough. They beat Iowa earlier in the season. Kansas State goes on the road and beats Oklahoma, and they beat Missouri by 28 points. So the Big 12 has shown a lot in some of these Power 5 crossover matchups, and there's so much parity. There's no off weeks, and a lot of these teams are so evenly matched. So I'm going to go ahead and take Kansas State just because they're playing at home and they're having a lot to build on, but I think it's going to be a very close game.
Yeah, I think it's Kansas State and Kansas State big. I think Texas Tech is going to still be walking with a hangover from the Texas win, and having to travel makes that even more difficult. Give me the Wildcats big to cover that 8-point spread. All right, so speaking of close games, Oklahoma State Baylor is a huge game. Number 9 Oklahoma State, 16 Baylor. Baylor's favored by 2 at home. Obviously, the last time they played in the Big 12 championship came down to inches at the goal line to give Baylor the win. Again, I have no idea what's going to happen in this game, but it's going to be well played, and it's going to be really close. My pick, I still think Baylor is being underrated. Their loss at BYU is not a bad loss. That's a fine loss. I don't like picking Baylor to do well in anything, but I do think that they can come away with this game in that Toilet Bowl Stadium this weekend.
Yeah, I think this is a matchup with two quarterbacks that I think you could describe as being sort of hot and cold at times. Blake Shapen and Spencer Sanders both have had really good performances and very inconsistent performances. I think Spencer Sanders, though, he's so dynamic that he provides more challenges for Baylor's defense than I think Blake Shapen and the Bears do for the Cowboy defense. I think, coming off, I believe Oklahoma State's coming off a bye week, so they're going to be well rested for this game. And Baylor coming back against a physical Iowa State team. I like Oklahoma State in this matchup just because I think it's going to come down to the two quarterbacks, and I think Spencer Sanders is going to make enough happen to help the Cowboys get that win.
All right. Glad we disagree on some of these. So next is Iowa State, a favorite at undefeated Kansas. I don't understand what the marketplace or prognosticators see in the Cyclones. Nothing that they've done thus far in this season makes me think that they can go into Lawrence and stop this Kansas team that's been playing so well. I think the line scares me because that means somebody does see that, and maybe it's something I'm missing, or I've been fully under the spell of this interesting Jayhawks season, but I'm not seeing it. Give me the Jayhawks. Jalen Daniels goes wild, and Iowa State's got nothing to stop him.
I'm going to go with Kansas as well. I think Kansas is the way the Kansas offense has been rolling to start the season. I know Iowa State is a team that they play very physical, and they can win grimy, dirty football games. Not like dirty in a cheap way, just like they win. They
grind
win,
it out.
Yeah, they win grinders. They win tough games. Could I see that happening this weekend? Yes, I can. Just because they play very physical football. But I think the way Kansas has been rolling, not much has slowed that offense down. And they've taken good care of the football as well, which has been very uncharacteristic for a Jayhawk team. So I'm on the Kansas hype train for sure right now. I want them to be 5-0 when they face TCU. That's my hope.
Like it. Last game in the Big 12 is West Virginia at Texas. The Longhorns are a 9.5-point favorite at home, and potential that Quinn Ewers might come back for this game. West Virginia gets a little bit of a rest, having played their game on Thursday last week. So still, I think Texas takes this and covers the spread. They bounce back, and they don't let this season completely fall apart just yet. I think, there have been Texas teams in the past where lose a game like last week in Lubbock and just decide the season's over, and they pack it up and maybe start preparing for the NFL draft or whatever it is that Texas players do. I don't think it's too early in the season, I think, for that to happen, especially they can just blame it all on Quinn Ewers not being in that game. And, well, if Ewers had played, we would have won. We would have beat Alabama if Ewers had played the whole game, blah, blah, blah. They can talk themselves into that. And that's enough to keep them on track and motivated to go out and take down a Mountaineers team that, despite winning this past week, has been pretty disappointing and lackluster in all aspects.
I am going to go with West Virginia in this game. I'm going with West Virginia because I like what I've seen from JT Daniels this season. I mean,
he's been good.
You put the late pick against Kansas aside, he's put up some very good numbers. And, going on the road against Virginia Tech, I know Virginia Tech's been struggling, but you go on the road, put up 33 points. That's
a very tough place to play,
yeah,
too.
And it's the Black Diamond Trophy game. I think West Virginia has a lot of balance offensively. They have multiple backs who can carry the ball 15, 20 times a game. JT Daniels has experience. They have a big-time receiver in Bryce Ford-Wheaton. Texas obviously can run the ball very well also, and if they do have Quinn Ewers back for that game, that's a huge difference maker for them. But I feel like West Virginia is going to come in with some swagger. I think they're going to come in with an edge, having started the season so poorly, and I think the coaching staff and the players alike in that locker room understand that they got to put the pedal to the metal and really start to turn this season around, and that can continue. Obviously, they want to build off of what they did against Virginia Tech, but it's something that can be a huge lift for that team and that fan base if they can come down and get this win. So I like West Virginia in that game.
I like it. And yeah, I mean, West Virginia now has seen that this Texas giant is not so giant and can be slayed. And I think Texas is dealing with some big time injuries as well. It's possible Xavier Worthy is out. So yeah, I think you're right on. There's an opportunity for West Virginia to go and get a big time win that could save Neil Brown's job there. Let's see. That's it for the Big 12. We've already gone over an hour here. I don't know that we need to hit too much of the national games. Let's see here. I think the one I'm most interested in is Kentucky and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a home favorite by a touchdown, but two teams in the top 15 competing for some. I think potential for special season. The winner of this game really puts themselves on track to take on the bigger dogs in their respective sides of the SEC. So I'm really just intrigued by that game. I think Ole Miss has looked pretty good this season against maybe not the best competition, but I think seeing them in this test here with Kentucky, and Kentucky, I mean, Will Levis continues to get NFL draft buzz, and true freshman Barry Brown has been really strong. So I think just an interesting game that could have some pretty good influence on how the rest of the season plays out. Anything for you on the national stage this week?
That Kentucky Ole Miss game I'll touch on because I want to root for the TCU guys, Kari Coleman and Zach Evans with Ole Miss. But also on the note of Kentucky, I got to shout out my Northern Illinois Huskies playing Kentucky close last week. NIU is from DeKalb, which is about 15-20 minutes from where I live. Been to a couple Husky games, and the MAC conference being well represented. NIU played them tough. I mean, it was tied 14-14, I believe, at halftime, and NIU star receiver went down with it was either a knee injury or an Achilles before the start of the season, and I believe they were playing with their backup quarterback too, because Rocky Lombardi, who's a Michigan State transfer, is their starter.
Right.
I don't believe he played in that matchup, but I was happy to see that. Just a local team going out there and playing real tough against a ranked SEC opponent. Of course, Kentucky, another good story, a team that has, these last several years has struggled a bit in football, but starting to pick up some momentum. Ole Miss, though, I think when you have these SEC East versus West matchups, I usually roll with those teams in the West. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss in this matchup. I think they're going to run the ball really well.
I'm with you. Okay. A lot of excitement this week. Looking forward to the big game in Amon G. Carter Stadium. Again, Saturday morning, 11 a.m., ABC. We hope to see some fans out there, hope to see it all decked out in purple. It's going to be a wild time, and hope to see a Horned Frog victory. Look for our predictions to come true yet again. TCU to go out and continue to be undefeated would be huge going into the big contest at Kansas the following week. So I think that's going to be all for us this week. Thank you guys for sticking with us and listening. Go check out everything on frogsofwar.com. We're got all kinds of fun pieces and discussion points up there this week and through the game day. Go enter the conversation. Join us in the game thread there on game day. It's a fun time chopping it up with fans, discussing how the game's going, sharing all our anxieties and excitements and all of that there is fun. And follow us on Twitter at Frogs of War. That's all I've got. Go Frogs.
Yes, sir.
How about you, Russ?
Go Frogs. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. frogsofwar.com. Get up early. It's going to be an early morning, so get to the tailgate, get to the stadium, do what you got to do.
Get in the stadium. Yeah, get in the stadium early. I know that's
pack that stadium, and I want to see a great crowd. Obviously, I wish I could be there. Let's give let's give everybody a show. I want to see a good football game, and I want to see the fans show up and support this football team.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Exciting week ahead. Thanks, everybody. Go Frogs. Stay safe.
Frogs.